Welcome to DPX-AI. I am Larry Vogel, and I will be your host tonight. Let's get started. All right. So
Larry, where are most of the people from? I assume most everybody here is like Southern California.
Yes, I would. As far as I know, Paul Anderson lives up near South Bay area, but still in Southern California. Don, there's a Don Lyons. That's who we were waiting for on that last name.
Hey.
Welcome, Mr. Lyons. We haven't had Mr. Lyons. Have you been to an AI meeting yet?
I have.
Oh, okay. We've just missed you on a few, I guess. Yeah, I don't think anybody here is actually from very far away. Everybody's kind of pretty local. All right, so welcome to our November 30th DPX-AI. I kind of feel like I can't even think off the top of my head how many we've done so far, but kind of feels like we're still kind of getting our legs together to figure out what the group wants to be. As usual, it's definitely a place where you can send in images, whether they're completed or not, or here's an image I'm having a problem with, and maybe somebody in the group will have a suggestion. I will say that actually I'm gonna try to find, because I don't know if I actually shared the image with everybody that I did a while ago. So hang on a second. I'm gonna see if I can actually find this here. Because it was I mostly want to share it with the idea that one of the good things about belonging to a group where you can do these sort of things, and let me get back to my where you can actually get into a group and share images and hopefully get some benefit from it. And I will say, quite a while ago, I'm trying to find my right folder here. So here's our folder here. I shared an image, and let me see if I can figure out which folder it's in. So this was it here. So I shared this image that I was working on. It was called No Way Home, and it's part of a series I'm doing. And I think Kaz was the one who made the comment, like, "Hey, wait a minute, where's the smoke?" And I'm thinking, well, we don't always have smoke when there's a fire, right? And so, but
it's a gas grill.
Yeah, it's a gas grill in the bottom of the boat. That's where it is. And so the weird thing is like, I'm thinking in my head, I go, it didn't even really occur to me. And then I thought, well, as usual, most kind of critiques sometimes will settle in with you and you think about it for a few days. And so let's see, this was July. So let's see if I actually did the change in August. And no, it's not there. August. Maybe I was slow on the uptake and it took another month. Let's see if it's here in September.
You really didn't want to show it.
There it is. So I ended up, based on, Kaz saying, "Hey, wait a minute, where's the smoke?" And I went back and played with it a little bit. And when I got it done, I go, I kind of like it better with the smoke in it, right? So I think that's always one of the values of, belonging to any sort of a group, and the ability to share images. Because all it takes is sometimes that one comment that can really add to something that you're doing. And so I'll say thank you, Cass, for the suggestion. I like what it did to the image in the end, and it also, again, like I say, supports, I think, the idea that sharing images is a great way to get feedback and make your work better. I mean, that's kind of what we're all trying to do, aren't we? I mean, even if everybody says that you're not allowed to use AI, it's cheating. I'm going to teach you how to cheat better. We're all going to help each other cheat better, if that's the case.
I love it.
Well, it's interesting.
Won't be for long.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I have a Monday morning group. We meet so there's an example. We meet every Monday morning at 10 a.m. It kind of started during COVID time, and it is just kind of carried forward. And yeah, a lot of people are not around at 10 a.m. to join the meeting. But this last Monday, we talked a little bit about this idea about where are we headed with all this technology. What are camera clubs doing? Have any of them changed their rules yet? the big question I think on everybody's mind was, with the San Diego Fair, since last year it was not allowed. The question is, have they come to any new conclusion? Are they going to create a new category? Are they going to just say no AI? And one of my comments about that blanketed statement of the no AI, I mean, you can't just say it anymore, because now there's retouching tools inside Photoshop that are using AI to do the retouching, generative fill and the replace tool and all that stuff. And so, those are things that, if you used by definition the idea they're not your pixels, you can't use them. Well, those tools are now creating pixels that were not part of your image. I mean, content aware fill is obligated to using pixels from your photograph, but these new tools create brand new pixels based on the content of your image, but only looking at it to be able to generate that area that you're going to fill. And then beyond the retouching tool of going, let's circle this area and remove it, generative fill, let's circle this area and add something there now, right? So all of that becomes a part of it. So when somebody says, well, we're not going to allow any images with AI, then that means now we're going to say there are tools in Photoshop you can no longer use on your photographs. Yes, Kaz.
Also, something that's really important with this no AI stuff is everybody that comes up with this no AI is always thinking about prompters. They're not thinking about,
right,
people with GANs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something I'm waiting on somebody to come in here and help us, load up a GAN.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to play with.
Well, and that's why I say the blanketed statement doesn't work anymore, because I agree with you. That's sort of the knee-jerk reaction to writing a prompt and getting an image back, and then that becomes 100%. Here's my new image. I wrote a prompt and I got an image back, and that might very well be something that's like, okay, yeah, we're not going to allow that into the fair or into our photo clubs or whatever. And then like I said, then. Okay, so then the question then is okay, are we now going to be allowed to use things, generative fill? Are we going to be able to add things, take away and add to our images? Yeah, Kaz.
So one of the things that I notice on Facebook, I have friends posting pictures of stuff, and one of my friends posted something with a Buddha and a couple of elephants, and it was clearly Midjourney. I mean, it's like you can recognize this stuff. Midjourney just sticks out like a sore thumb to me, and I think that's part of the criteria that would be judged on some of this work. Does it just reek of Midjourney, or have you actually done something that pushed it past the boundaries of the common ordinary prompt?
Yeah, well, and I mean, the other side of that for me, I mean, many of you know, I made an announcement this year that I'm no longer going to judge photo contests anymore. I hate photo competitions or art competitions, competitive art. It just seems like such a foolish endeavor. I mean, we all agree with how subjective it is, and one judge loves something, another judge doesn't like something. The great example of, I entered an image into San Diego Fair and I didn't get it past the first round of judging, and then I put it into the Orange County Fair. I won a first place and I sold the print during the show. So there you go. So if I won an award, what's the value of that award when who knows whoever the judge was, and there's just so many subjective things to it. But the hardest thing for me has always been as a judge, and especially with clubs that most of them do use a numbering system. And so in a value of 6 to 9, because heaven forbid we wouldn't want to give somebody a 0. So we make up, another scale from 6 to 9. 6 still is the bottom of the score, no matter where you decide where you're going to start from. But looking at a photograph and going, well, that's a 7, or maybe that's an 8. And the numbering thing to me just has always felt so arbitrary. And the idea of giving first, second, and third place awards to people. My example has always been when somebody crosses a finish line in a race, that's obvious who won first place. I go, but a dancing contest, cooking contest, and art contest, it's also subjective, So I think the true value part of it, there's two things here for me. The true value in sharing the work is kind of exactly what I just showed. The idea that to get some feedback from a judge about the image, or a critique that says maybe here's what you could do to improve it, or even in a group situation go, this is a good image and let me tell you why I think it's a good image. And so we all learn from that instance. But how do we learn from first, second, and third place? And yes, competition sometimes is a thing that is a driving element that makes us do better work. But I hope that people just do better work because they want to do better work. Again, Kaz. Kaz and I are having a conversation.
Just, listening to you talk about this reminds me of the Artist Alliance Biennial.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at that show and it's like, clearly this guy likes painting.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, I don't think I saw any photography. There was certainly nothing digital. I don't even think I saw any drawings or printmates. There might have been some prints.
There were a couple of photographs. I know a few people that got some photographs in, but yeah.
I just didn't.
Well, but to me also, okay, so like say the show at the museum really, and for me it's not to say there's no room to curate exhibits, because you have to. I mean, if you have 1,000 entries and you can only hang 90 pieces, you're going to have to curate that show. But also about 2 or 3 shows back, the museum decided also to start awarding prizes. So there's now a first, second, and third place in the biennial show. But the other thing about competitions, and at the museum, I would say I don't think that they have any rules that I can think of off bat. That you can do anything you want. You can submit anything you want, because I mean it is actually photographs and paintings and sketches and sculpture and all that stuff is just, it's a wide open entry. But with so many clubs and competitions, as soon as you create the competition, then they start creating either categories and or rules and start to tell people what they can and can't do to their photographs. And in my whole analysis of kind of last year's event at the fair, and me not being able to do a presentation about AI during a workshop was just crazy. But it caused me to sort of like sit back and reevaluate. And the thing that for me that occurred to me was like, there's nothing about all of those rules that is supportive of the creative process. And to think that, I now have to start thinking about, okay, I want to put an image into this show, but I can or can't do this to my photograph. And I've always just felt like, well, who the hell are you to tell me that I can't do this to my photograph? It's my image, this is what I want to do. And somebody had mentioned the other day, kind of like what you just said, Kaz, is like, oh, AI is so obvious. And I go, well, then if it's so obvious and it's so bad, then we don't really need a rule, do we? The judge will be able to look at it and go, yeah, no, that's AI, I don't want it in, and pass on it, right? So, if it's that obvious, then do we need a rule? The thing is that it's not that obvious. I mean, I think anybody who's been in it for 10 minutes, it can be fooled either way. There was a thing online where you can go in and take a test. There's like 12 images and you decide whether it's AI or not AI. And the deck was kind of stacked in favor of some composite images that somebody had made, these composite photographs that you would you look at it, and to me, in my mind, it was like, oh, this is a 50-50 chance that it is or it isn't. So you're kind of guessing anyhow. And I would say I got 8 or 9 out of the 12 correct. But the thing is, I wasn't always wrong in the right direction. Sometimes it was an image that wasn't an AI image and I thought it was, which then for me would have, taken it out of the competition because I would have unfairly ruled it as an AI image, and we have to remove that. Or the opposite happened, was what you would think is that, oh, that is an AI image and it turned out to be, and I would remove it. Or you think it's a straight image and you let it in and it turns out it's an AI image in the end. So there's a lot of variables here about how these images are going to, be submitted to competitions, and really putting the pressure on the judges to make those decisions, I think, is really not fair, because I think that exactly what my experience was with that online test is going to happen in a real life scenario where it's going to matter a whole lot more than what an online test is. And so, there's going to be things that are going to get through, or things that are going to get eliminated that don't deserve to be. And so It's a huge. I think it's a big can of worms. I have no answer for it other than, good luck, I guess, to all these clubs and competitions who are going to try to create some kind of a rule about AI. Like I said, or we had already cast, and I already mentioned, is this idea that there's already so many tools now in Photoshop that are using or generating parts of images that are pixels that don't come from your camera or any of your personal images. They're completely generated by AI, but they're used to retouch a photograph with. And so for me to decide that I can't use that tool because my club won't let me put it in, or if you're flipping around back and forth between different retouching tools, and now you got to remember which image I used AI retouching and which ones I didn't use it on. It's just also going to become a crazy shell game even for the photographer themselves. So, any comments from anybody, or anybody have any experience with their clubs right now? Has anybody made any rules?
Is this AI?
I have no idea.
That's how I usually tell as I look at the hands.
There you
the hands
go.
are like,
But like anything, I mean, I use the example of, I mean, what are we on? Like maybe in Midjourney, we're on maybe the fifth iteration. That they made some changes or big changes on. If you think back on the fifth iteration of Photoshop compared to what it is now, it's like what it was that long ago is nothing like what we're doing now. And again, this stuff is just going to get better and better and more integrated. I mean, that's going to be the thing. Is that as it becomes more integrated, it's going to be a hard thing to really like weigh against. I would say it looks like Greg
better.
has a comment. Yeah.
It's getting better every month noticeably.
Yeah.
The hands are not really obviously wrong anymore. Sometimes they'll be wrong, and you can easily fix them in Midjourney, and even Photoshop is getting a little better at fixing those things. I think I don't agree with the comments about competitions on the whole. I mean, in my opinion, I think they still serve a lot of value, especially for people that are starting out. It's a little way to make a little money on an image and get yourself seen, and you get seen if you're at the top of the pile. So that has some value. But this thing about the rules is really important, and it is going to take some time, just like other Photoshop phenomena. Different levels just kind of eked their way into the competition, and nobody noticed and nobody saw. And if we can't see it, then it's kind of hard to call it out if it looks photographic. I don't know where you draw the line. At some point, it has to be about the image and not how it's made.
Yep,
but then again,
yep.
when we had AI stuff coming in 2019, I could see that it was button pushing and not creativity. And that next to somebody that really had skills at the time, we didn't have prompts at the time to make it super easy for people, but it was still pretty simple the way that these things were put together. And it didn't belong competing next to somebody who had really good Photoshop skills.
Well, I think that's a good example because I
tell sure whether the person had good Photoshop skills, but I saw the technology in front of the image.
Yeah, well, and I think back, when I can remember a lot of times images, when Photoshop came along, and then people were using a lot of the topaz filters that the Cezanne filter, or all these things that sort of were like these artistic interpretations, or the painterly ones where basically you just push a button and it turns your photograph into a Cezanne painting, more or less. But it was real obvious. It was the same thing as like you go, if you know enough about it, you go, well, this is just a bunch of button pushing, applying filters to an image. There's nothing, doesn't feel very creative. But then you would find somebody who was using the exact same filters, but doing something way more creative with it. And those are the kind of things that, again, I mean, those become, I think what you said, Greg, is at some point it has to become about the image. And again, okay, if somebody's just button pushing and a crappy version of your image comes up with a Cezanne filter on it, the judges are going to look at it and go, yeah, okay, that looks like a button pushing Cezanne filter. But you'll also recognize somebody is like, wow, okay, they've done something with this Cezanne filter. They've done more than. And I think that's,
Larry?
yeah. Go ahead, Dee.
Uh, yeah, I was just going to say something Greg said. It's about judges have to make a decision whether it is or isn't a topaz button pushing thing. I created an image using an old jalopy following a tutorial, ending up with a brush strokes and outline in black, and it took about 9 steps to do it. And then I thought, what if I enter it and the judge looks at it and says, oh, that's a topaz?
Well, I've mentioned this before that I as a judge, I learned early on was that it's funny when you're doing club competitions, and especially the monthly ones where the room is full of the people who have submitted images, and you're the judge and you're invited to make comments as you're doing the judging. And the audience has to remain completely quiet. And many times I had made wrong assumptions about an image, and where in the end, somebody would come to me and they would go, you know, you thought that moon was put in, but it was actually in the original photograph. And so I had to change. I'd start thinking about, again, that sort of idea that you could be wrong in the other direction. And so I slowly kind of altered my critiques or my comments to, I'm not sure if that moon was really taken in camera or not. If it was, phenomenal photograph. You know, they got this giant moon in a photograph. I go, and if it wasn't, well done also, because it looks pretty real to me, like it's all been put together well. So, you know, it's not like rather than just going, I think this moon's been put in, it's been dropped in, because I just, like I said, found out too many times that I was kind of wrong about it. But it wasn't a negative to me still, because it was still whether it works or not. Like Greg's saying, in the end, does it work in the image, and either it does or it doesn't. And so how it got there can be incidental. But I always say, though, this is one of the great things about the critique and the sharing process is it gives us a chance to talk directly to the maker and find out how things are done, because we are all curious about how to make these things. And so when it comes to sharing with other photographers, and for me that's what the DPX thing has always been about, is like, yeah, okay, let's talk about how it was done and whether it's done successfully or not. And that but ultimately in a show, when something hangs on a wall, there isn't always the artist there to tell you how they did it. So yes, in the end, ultimately the image has to work or not, and the way that it's made is only interesting, I think, from the maker's standpoint, you know, other makers. Anyhow, I didn't know we were going to get started on this, but I think it's such an interesting topic, and I think I was talking to somebody this morning about it, and I said, I remember last year at the fair when we did the judges roundtable. At the very end, Lois says, well, we got a year to decide how we're going to handle this. And I'm thinking, no, you don't. It's if we wait a year, you're in trouble all over again. I said, but the problem now, too, and I was thinking about this because the person I was working with today, they've already sort of, started bringing in the AI techniques from Photoshop into their images. So now people have been working with this technique for over a year and waiting to find out how are we going to be, will we be allowed or not allowed to use images where we use these techniques in them. So, people are using generative fill every day now for a year, and then you're going to find out later on, you go, well, you really can't use generative fill in a image, submitted at the fair. And the thing that came back to me is the same thing, and I mentioned this before, when Gene Wild was head of the photo exhibit, back when we started the digital thing, and doing sky replacements, was something that we were told we weren't allowed to do to landscape photographs, and their way of saying that was, well, you can only submit images created from one image file. And so that took away from doing any compositing to a photograph that was in a category other than digital compositing. And then, I had mentioned to him, I said, but what if I'm really good at this sky replacement thing? You would never know whether I did it or not. And, Gene's comment back was, well, I guess we really shouldn't be creating rules that we can't enforce. And now we're right back to that point where if they say, well, you can't use AI, or the comment that was kind of tossed out and about at the fair was, if they're not your pixels, you can't use them. And so that would also include generative fill. And at that point, you're now retouching in your image where you're generating pixels that don't necessarily belong to your image. But, how do you keep track of all that? So, like I say, I don't think they should wait till, you're going to find out anyhow, because they'll put the rules out online sooner or later when they announce the start of entering for the fair. But it'll be interesting. I'm curious to know, has anybody heard anything from any of the fair coordinators or anything about this next year?
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet. Yep.
Hey, I wanted to weigh in a little bit
Yeah.
here, Greg, on your comment. In all due respect to the economic realities for those winners of contests, I sort of draw the line between exhibitions and quote-unquote contests. And
yeah.
I think the idea of exhibitions, that's meritorious, particularly for new photographers. But when you get into the contest realm, it's sort of a pass-fail situation, which can be very demoralizing for a lot of photographers and off-putting. And I know many photographers that have kind of felt slighted in the contest environment. And like Larry said, you'll often find somebody that gets into San Diego and they don't get a whiff, and they get best in show in Orange County.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's a great way to explain this, but I think contests are inherently difficult for a lot of photographers. The economics notwithstanding.
Yeah.
And exhibitions, I think, are good. Feeling judged negatively is difficult for people that are entering the field or the realm of photography. And, we certainly don't want to discourage that. So that's kind of
That's a good point, because I do know some people that have, I'm not going to say, they didn't give up, but I know a lot of people was like, oh yeah, I've entered the fair several times, never got in, and I won't enter there anymore. Or, there's that little story from when I was growing up. We used to go to the little, this older guy, Englishman. He had a little studio in Orange County that we did critiques there, and he had the English, the wit of an Englishman, and we loved that. We marveled at his witticisms. And so his one comment about competitions or being submitting to juried shows. He says, look, if you're going to submit to juried shows and enter into competitions, and you get a lot of rejections, you can't let those rejections, get into your head and convince you that you're not any good or you should give this up. Just, don't let it go to your head. And he says, and if you entering these juried shows and you're winning competitions and you're hanging in all the shows, don't let it get in your head and make you think that now you're the best photographer in the world, or, hey, I've arrived, I'm better. There is that sort of, again, this speaks back to the subjectivity of how things get judged and juried. But I always love that idea. It's like, doesn't matter whether you're winning or losing, you shouldn't let that get into your head. You keep doing what you do, you put it out there. I think the best thing in this world is, no matter how narrow of a lane your work occupies, or how broad that lane is, you will always be able to find an audience for something that you're doing. You might have to look twice as hard. I love using Thomas Kincaid as my scapegoat here. He had such a broad lane that, he just sold the crap out of that stuff, but I definitely wouldn't call it, the best art in the world. And at the same time, there's other people that have done amazing work that really had this sort of narrow lane where most people would not have bought their work or given them awards for what they're doing. My fifth grader
think
can
for
do that. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
It doesn't matter really what for music, for art, for poetry, for writing, for animation, all of these things have multiple venues. They're all, you can judge yourself by how much you sell or how much people appreciate, clap for you, or you self-guided and it doesn't really matter what anybody says, and you keep entering in as many things as you possibly can. And I think you get that can take some guts to keep entering in things that you're not getting into.
Yeah.
Just that you need to have some spine to enter things in anything, and whether it's an exhibition, any exhibition is going to be juried too, unless you're invited to.
Yeah.
It's kind of a subset, but yes, that's true.
Yep.
But
Or we
kind of
do it.
hierarchy. When you're doing prizes, you're pointing out a hierarchy, and it's an artificial hierarchy, but it has some merit to it. Even it's in the subjective mind of the jurors, but there is some order to it, even though we may not believe that my piece didn't get in, so they therefore I've had that experience in my head a lot of times, and I can't let it stop me. I have to propel and say, well, I'm just going to keep trying, or I'm going to try something else, and hopefully that the comments that come from critiques, hopefully people who enter in the fair come to the critiques and learn, getting more ideas why they may or may not have gotten in, but it's still helpful just to get a bunch of different opinions about your work, and discard what doesn't serve you, and use what you can to tell better stories.
Yeah. So Beverly, you started to say something?
Fair point.
Yeah, of course, my attitude, it's just my thought is, or, you just enter things because you love to. It's just what you want to do, and you try not to be offended by what other people are doing. Then that way you don't feel bad if you win or lose or whatever. You're having fun because you want to do it.
So Beverly
And
Beverly has an online service that if you're feeling rejected, contact Beverly. She will help you through the process. No, you're right. I mean, it is all about attitude, right? I mean, but I agree with Dawn also, right? Everybody who has said something has a valid point, I believe. Yeah, go ahead, Dee.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're entering the fair or whatever competitions and you keep getting passed over, wouldn't you go to a club and learn how to improve?
Yeah, or you go, screw them, they don't know what they're talking about.
Well, that's attitude adjustment then.
Yeah, Kaz.
You
Let's
have
hear
to,
about the AI.
Go ahead, Kaz.
yeah, I'm just saying that you have to develop delusions of grandeur.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look up in the dictionary narrow lane, my picture's there.
Yeah, Kaz does
So,
that.
I've had to develop delusions of grandeur my whole life because I'm out alone on an island.
Well, that's it. If nobody knows Kaz's work, Kaz is a mathematical poet, a visual mathematical poet. And so he ultimately has no competition in that field. So
Number one, no matter what.
right. We're going to have to create just a category, a visual mathematical poetry section over here, and there's one guy hanging in it. Which is an interesting thing, too, when you start thinking about we can categorize, these shows to death so that we end up creating enough lanes that everybody has someplace to hang, I guess.
And then Kaz shows up at the Artists Alliance. He gets recognized for the quarter.
There he goes. He gets put in. But, it even happens there. More than once, somebody has, after we have selected somebody, there'll be somebody who'll come out and go, who picked that? Just to let you know they disagree with you, and you say, well, there's a group of people that, on the planning council. They're the ones who select the images that get selected at the end of the night. But yeah, it's you're never without a critic in the room to let you know that you have not picked the best image for the night. And so there was one lady one night that actually out loud verbally said, "That's not art, that is shit." And I'm like, how dare you? Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah, you.
I remember that. I was sitting right next to her.
Yes, you were. I remember that. And then she came over to me and she goes, "Who picked that? That's not art." And I said, "Well, the planning council always selects an image, and that's what they selected." And I said, "And first of all, I want to congratulate you that you think your opinion matters to me." I mean, yeah, that she gets she has the final say on what is or what isn't art, which is an interesting, perspective, anyhow. So, all right.
I think I wanted to say just one thing. One of the things I always, when I'm feeling bad, especially about multiple rejections and all that sort of thing, is to remind ourselves why we do it. And I'm sure that everyone here would have the same answer once you really think about it. You do it for yourself first, and then what happens after that is really kind of inconsequential.
Yeah.
It would be nice to be, acknowledged, but look at Van Gogh. I mean, he did his thing his whole life, and he was a very happy man and became famous after he died, right?
I don't know how happy he was. But.
I don't know. Well, yeah, that's true. It's a little light on the ear.
Turns out the happiest man. Turns out the happiest man on earth demonstrates it by chopping part of his ear off.
There you go.
But yeah,
just a form of expression.
Yeah, but years ago, there goes Kaz. Years ago, I was in a junior college class, and the class was called portfolio development, and which was just a fancy name for a small group. There were 10 of us in the class. We met in the instructor's office, and basically whatever projects we were working on, we would bring whatever we have at that point, we'd bring it in and basically have a critique. And the teacher was kind of the leader of the critique session. And this is where I had my first introduction to this whole process. And it was so phenomenal. I learned so much more in this little group talking about our images. And not to mention, the teacher herself, she had such a great way to articulate, when we talk about art. And I remember sitting through those classes and thinking, oh, I want to keep this going. How do we keep doing this after we get out of this class? But one day, and the only way you could get into class was you had to petition the teacher to get in. It wasn't like you go down to the office and sign up and you're in. And one day, the class was already kind of started, and one guy came to the teacher and said, I'd like to bring my work in and show you my work, and I would like to get into this portfolio development class. This guy comes in and he shows up and he shows, I don't know, 8 or 10 images, and she says, well, tell us about your images as you're showing your images. And he had this real sort of cavalier, casual approach, like, oh yeah, I'm playing with this and I'm playing with that, and when I'm here, I might do something because I think it looks interesting. And then she says, well, I think maybe you'd be better suited for so-and-so's class, maybe start there. And this was like in a very short period of time, he was out of the class. And I go, how can you do that? It was like in less than 15 minutes, you determined whether this guy would be suitable for the class or not. And she says, and this what reminded me of it was your comment, Don Fike, was she says, I believe if I were to ask, which she says first, his approach to why he's doing what he's doing, I have a feeling that he may end up doing stained glass next week or on to something else. I didn't really get a sense of commitment to anything that he was doing. And she says, I have the opinion that if I were to ask anybody in this class, why do you do what you do, in one way or another, the answer would be, because I can't imagine not doing this. And it was one of those things that just, those would not have been my words, but when she said it, I'm like, yeah, that is the way this feels, is like, I can't imagine, not doing this. And so, yeah, whether or not you get juried in or out of a show, and whether you're winning prizes or selling prints and all that, I think most of us would keep on doing it. Yeah, Kaz.
I do it because I get anxiety if I don't do
There
it.
you go.
I don't choose. Who in the hell would choose to do mathematical visual portrait?
That's your problem.
You know, I don't choose that.
Yeah. All right. So I didn't get a lot of images from everybody, but I will. Let's go ahead and take a look at some. Let's see what we can get into. So thanks for. I mean, this is. I got to be careful. I'm not going to say this has become my favorite topic, but it's definitely high up there on my list now, just because we're really, again, sort of like teetering on this edge of what we're going to validate or invalidate, somebody's photographs if you're making photographs, or again, if you're doing anything else that would incorporate AI into your process. We're kind of playing with this, and most of us who went from analog to digital, this all feels very, very familiar. I mean, there's nothing new about this. It's like it was all poo-pooed when we made this switch over and what you can and can't do, and then eventually it just sort of made its way in. And I've had so many people that have kind of said, yeah, just give it some time. I mean, people are going to forget about it, and it'll just become a part of the process. And I agree. I kind of think it will be. The minute that it showed up into Photoshop, I go, it's now a photo technique. I go, I don't know how you can deny it at that point. But, and if you do any time on YouTube, you'll find that almost every YouTube guy that does photography, they're all just marveling at, the abilities of what this, new AI stuff does in Photoshop and as well as outside of Photoshop. All right. I think we beat that horse. So, Mr. Paul Anderson, you sent me 3 pieces that are all about your final piece, and I'm going to let you. So, tell me how we want to look at these, or should I pull them all 3 up at the same time?
Maybe. Let's see. Maybe just the first one.
At the top.
Well, it's maybe too late. Yeah, but I'd just like to get an impression of what people see in that before I describe how I built it up.
Okay.
Yeah, the final one.
All right.
If people can see it over the left.
Well, why don't you first
Yeah.
tell us? I think it'd be fair to just talk about at least the mosaic part of your process, because I think it's interesting for people to know how you made the image, but not necessarily completely. Just the idea of using the mosaic panels, what you did.
Okay. I've developed a process over the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, maybe, where I, using software that I have written, I take one or more source images and break them up into tiles, or mosaic tiles, if you will. And then I rebuild an image with those tiles, but I do it in such a way that, first of all, there are multiple layers, as you can see here. And then the tiles that are, when I rebuilt it with the software, I'm choosing the placement of tiles such that they don't exactly fit often. Not always. Sometimes they do exactly fit that same spot in the original image. It'll look like that same place, but usually not. Usually there's some kind of dissonance between the tile that's put back into the image and what the original image looked like. So that's the process. This one is, I don't know. This is actually, I processed 2 different images, and then I stacked the mosaics on pieces of the mosaics on top of each other.
Okay.
So I haven't actually tried that one before, so that's new.
So again, to understand, this is not a program that you go down and buy and load into Photoshop and it just runs for you. Paul actually built this thing from scratch, which to me is just like, first of all, I go, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. And he's been showing us on our regular DPX group nights too, this process, or from the last 4 years. And it's been amazing to watch the whole process sort of, grow and change. And as he sort of like perfects the program or adapts the program to do different things with different images. And so it's been amazing to watch it. And so, anyhow, this is the image. And so you said, to start with, you would like people to to look at the image and comment on what we're looking at first before we talk about.
You know, what are they seeing?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So anybody want to comment on what are they seeing?
I find it interesting, just kind of as a category, because we've got, like Photoshop is really, computer aided imagery. Then you've got generative art, which is really a computer program that you put together, and it's more experimental, and you get a lot of things that you don't know what you're going to get. And then this stuff is like in between, it's computer assisted, but it's not really generative either. So I find that interesting just because it's sitting in between. I like things in the cracks.
Mm-hmm. And Paul, have you had any comments about, I don't want to say negative, but this whole questioning about whether this is a photograph anymore? Because I know you share this to photo groups and maybe also to non-photo groups. I mean, is there any kind of hesitancy to accept this as a photograph?
Why is that important?
Well, it's not important. It's just a question.
Yeah.
No, people don't think of it as a photograph typically, and they don't really worry about whether it looks like a photograph. It's more like a piece of digital art. I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So is the back a building?
Yes.
Is this-
Oh, good. Okay. Yes.
Started off with it was a building.
Okay. That was.
Okay.
I see some.
That's kind of what I was looking for. If you could see that in there.
Yes.
Well, you see some windows here and there. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very interesting textures in there.
Yeah, I was looking at like some of these dotted panels.
Yeah. Have you done any with people in it?
Yeah.
Or is there maybe people in this one? Just out of curiosity, because it's the first time I see a door there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
With
here's
an
some
address.
numbers. Yeah.
Yes, I've done these with people in them. There are no people in here.
Yeah.
Well,
I find it interesting because it's the first time I've seen it before.
Okay.
But then I find my mind is got this register that I go through. What is the theme? What is this? What is that? And then I have to tell myself to stop doing that and look at the image.
Well, I think that's an interesting comment, Beverly, because I think there's a thing about I've talked about this before about abstracts. I mean, this is pretty abstract. That
Right.
when we identify the abstract as a photograph, then there's this sense where somebody feels like they need to resolve the riddle. So, okay, it's abstract, but what was it? What did you photograph? And I'd actually had that experience in a group where I'd brought an abstract image in, black and white, printed it large, and the very first question, and it was a group of painters and photographers, and the very first question was from a painter. He says, "So, what are we looking at?" And I said, "An abstract photograph." "No, I know that, but what is it we're looking at?" I go, "It's an abstract image." "No, I know, but what did you point your camera at?" I'm like, at this point, it doesn't really matter. It's about an abstract image. If this were a painting, you wouldn't be asking the painter, "What did you paint?" He painted an abstract painting. So photography carries with it this natural riddle, like, what is it? What did you really photograph? So, and I think what, like Beverly's saying, yeah, you kind of are going through your head trying to go, okay, so what is it really? What are these objects? What did you rearrange?
What,
Gotta
when people,
remember that a lot of artists don't believe that photographers are artists.
Right. Well, we've already won that battle.
Remember Andrew?
I can certainly argue that.
Yeah.
the thing is,
Remember?
Go ahead, Greg.
everybody experiences your art differently, personally to themselves. Some people ask one question, other people ask other questions. People would ask me about my art. What's the meaning of this? And I always loved just asking them, what does it mean to you? What do you see?
Right.
Because what I think, I'm already done with all of that. And now I put it out in the world. It's not my job anymore. And sometimes it is. Sometimes I want to talk about it. Sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
just like some people I ask really stupid questions, and sometimes, or most of the time, and sometimes I might ask a good question, and you know, it may or may not click with the artist, but I think people should continue asking questions, and as an artist, you say, I'm not going to tell you, or what do you see?
Mm-hmm.
And
One of
for that
one of my
interaction.
favorite
Go ahead, Don Fike.
one of my favorite activities at exhibitions where nobody knows who I am is eavesdropping.
By your own image.
Somebody,
Yeah.
yeah, somebody watch, and I love to hear, because they don't know who you are,
Right.
and they're actually saying, honestly what they feel or what they think or what they don't think, or I just love that.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Well,
It's the only way you're going to get an honest opinion.
so Paul, I think something interesting in here too. That, and I relate to some of the other things that you've done before, but interesting. There are these sort of darker recessed areas, right? So, and again, you mentioned that there's a lot of sort of layering of these panels. This one feels really layered, and also for people who haven't seen his other work, many times the mosaic panels end up sort of what do you want to say? They carry out to the edges with a sort of a blank background where you would kind of see, looks like maybe pieces of a puzzle are floating off the edges of it. This is all contained inside that rectangular space. It's edge to edge mosaics, which I think is different than some of the work you've shown before. And I like the idea of it being contained this way too. I think it works. I have
I think
I have a
this is
disadvantage
more of
because
a
I've seen the other images. It's hard. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, me too, Larry.
No. But I mean, I've seen what I saw the images that were made that he used to make the image with, so it really destroys the visual process having seen the other ones. But because
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's why I wanted you to show this one
yeah,
first.
I think it's the best way to do it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Could you say it's a Gary building deconstructed?
Well, there you go. No, it is.
Wow.
Whenever you're ready, we can go to the other
Okay.
image.
Well, I'll wait to see if anybody had anything else they wanted to add to this.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, Paul, all of the other work that I've seen like this in the other forum, there's always been a more direct link to the object, right?
Mhm.
So this is a much broader generalization. I mean, it's sort of a total abstraction. Then it's sort of, okay, well, what is it?
Yeah.
This is much different for me. I'm having a hard time identifying kind of a subject.
Yeah.
So that would be my my input. I'm trying to figure out what you intended, and my reaction is it's a little. It doesn't link me to anything. It doesn't evoke any emotion for me.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah.
But sometimes do you need a subject? Just the differentness of it is original and interesting. And it makes me look through the whole thing to see what is in there.
Mm-hmm.
If I get out of my head, like, where is a subject? Why does there have to be a subject in something like this?
Yeah, I think about that same thing when something is abstract, the whole piece, is the subject maybe. It doesn't, not necessarily looking for what part of this tells a story. I mean, I would say for me that it's interesting. It's interesting from a lot of levels of, again, technique, how it was made, even if I don't know how it's made. The technique is very interesting. The way kind of that deconstruction idea, the abstract nature of it is interesting. The depth of how these panels work against or with each other, those are all interesting. There's
It's like just after the art bomb went off.
yeah, you expected to see it kind of move apart and come back together again and reform.
Yeah. I kind of want to see it in video.
Yeah, right. This
Slow
is
motion.
one frame of a video, but
Hmm.
I haven't seen a lot of Paul's work, but what this piece looks much different than what I saw before. The other stuff seemed more flat. This really seemed to have a lot of depth in it, three-dimensional physical depth. And I got up and kind of moved away from it. And the further back I get from it, the more it looks like some sort of a architectural construction in 3D space, where you can really see these darker shadows go back 3 or 4 feet, maybe 5, 6 feet back into the space.
yeah, yeah.
You see numbers, I can tell. It looks like a mathematical
Mathematical poetry.
equation.
I think also it's interesting. I mean, this also encourages you to get, to move in, and it's interesting how, some of the mosaics have, 3 dimension to them. Some of them are just, depending on the angle, or just flat, front pieces. But I think the dimension of the ones that you do see do inform you then that these all have dimension to them. They all feel like they have depth to each mosaic square here. So,
No, this
I also like the touch. I also like the touch, the lower part of the picture where you feel like you're looking kind of into canyons with water back there and the doors. It kind of gives you a base for the whole thing.
all right, now the big reveal, Paul. Are we ready?
Larry, this is fascinating that no one's seeing the obvious thing.
Yeah, no.
Oh, this is.
I don't think I would see it either if I hadn't, when you sent me the images, I saw the other ones where it came from. So,
That's why I put it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. Okay.
okay, so here's
So
the two
start with that
images.
Yep, there's the 2 images.
Oh, that's what the white thing is. Wow.
So the story is that this building, 1245 Harwood, I think is the address, is right next door to our daughter's townhouse complex in Vancouver, British Columbia. We took a long road trip in October. We drove up there to see her and back. And this is a stunning building next door.
Yeah.
It's it replaced a very ugly mansion. And it's about, I can't remember, like 12 stories tall.
Wow.
Each floor is a complete townhouse, and they sell for 5 million Canadian each.
Wow.
And the family who owns it lives in the top 3 floors. But the bottom of it is one of the most stunning parts of it to me, with those architectural openings, right?
Yeah.
And that's the main lobby. And I was coming back, we were driving back, and one day all of a sudden I went, oh, that's a totem pole. Duh. Now, I went back and looked, we were in British Columbia, and I went back and looked at the artist's, there's a whole, the artist I think has died, but there's a firm that continues his kind of work. And I looked at, and this building is featured in their, on their page, their website, about the kind of things that this architectural firm can do. No mention at all of totem pole, but it just spoke totem pole to me, and I saw eagle in that shape. So, and I looked online, and I tried. I wanted to superimpose the eagle's face on it. So I tried online to see if I could find a picture of a totem pole, an eagle face, a real one. Nope, it just didn't exist in the kind of thing I wanted. And all of a sudden, Larry Vogel entered my consciousness, and I went, oh, AI. So, yeah, so the one on, so the eagle face is from Firefly.
Wow.
And I typed in, and this just happened like instantly. I typed in eagle face totem pole figure. That was the prompt. And then I told it to do it in the style of, and then I supplied the picture of the building base.
Oh.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it was like magic. This thing popped up, and I went, well, that's it. I only did this once.
Yeah.
And I went, that is exactly what I was looking for. And plus it has the metallic
Yeah.
sheen on it.
Well, congratulations. You might be the first guy in AI history to get what he asked for, what he was thinking of. This is what I was thinking of.
I thought I was going to do this for all morning, and it
That's
And then the other thing, I'm going to give you a plug. Last month you talked about using the, what are those things, the lookup tables?
yeah. Oh, for the coloring.
Yeah, the color lookup tables. So what I did to the building, the building itself has the Bleak Future light lookup table applied to it in Photoshop at about 30%. And it gave it this nice, I don't know, kind of
Right.
metallic sheen on it that I liked. So anyway, then the rest I say is history. Then I did a mosaic of both things. The building mosaic is behind some layers of the eagle mosaic, and there's some other things going on here too. It's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But I'm fascinated that no one, when this picture first came up, said, "Oh, I see the eagle face in
No.
it." So that's either good or bad. But
Well, that would be my comment is, well, it's just two different things. One is like, okay, so this really is totally abstracted from any of the two images. The other thing is when I think of your other photographs, I feel like there would, like when you do the ones of the cars or something like that, there's usually enough information where I see the grill of the car or the tires or something that I can connect mentally to the car image. And then I think what that does then is it mentally makes me alert as I'm looking at the rest of the image, like where are other parts of this car in these mosaics, where this is so abstracted that I don't see anything that other than that sort of like Beverly, the numbers that in the entry there. So you do kind of get a sense of, okay, there's an address, it must be a building, but it's so abstracted. My thought was back to, I mean, I think it works just exactly the way it is, but looking back at your other images, I would say if you allowed the eyes or the beak or something more to come out in where the parts of it that weren't transition through the mosaic process like you have done before, allowing certain things to remain untiled, it kind of helps, I think, add something to it. And it may be too much. It might make it too obvious, until we see it. But that's my take on it, only compared to the other stuff.
Now that I can see the bird in it,
Yeah.
Now that I've seen the original too.
Yeah.
Go back to this.
Go ahead, Dan.
Go back to the single image again and zoom in on it, because I thought that to me, I like keep going, zoom in a little more.
Oh, on this one. Okay, let me go back to the full screen. Here we go.
Now
Because
you can
this one,
see
as soon as you got to about, maybe one step back, it clarified it for me as the face of the bird was there. And I was trying to determine from way back, and I don't know if this is just a matter of the screen versus, if this was printed and put up on a wall, but to me it seemed more interesting at about this level than all the way back. And maybe that's just because it was less distinct.
Well, I do think, I mean, this is one of those interesting things. I've actually seen some of Paul's prints. We've used them in our shows, our juried shows that we've done at 2020. The size of the print, I mean, this is one of the things about being online. Everything's kind of the same size as your screen. But the size of the print then determines the size of the panels that are in the photograph. And so, I think that sometimes, if you did a small print like what we're seeing on a screen, 8 by 8 or whatever, would be a whole lot less impressive than a 30 by 40, where each of the mosaic squares then become much larger. I don't know. Anyone else?
I find it interesting. As a abstract, not knowing I didn't see the eagle at all, and I totally see it now, and it kind of spoils it for me because now I'm looking for the eagle. So, and before I was fascinated just with the space,
Right.
the depth, and the techniques. And when you just did the zoom a couple minutes ago there, that you really see in there the space and the texture, and to me that's really beautiful. All of that, the just interesting juxtapositions of colors and textures and shapes, and a large print on the wall. I wouldn't be looking for what is it. I wasn't looking for that at all in it, and now that I see the image, it's interesting to see how it was created and where it came from. But for the end piece of it, I don't think it matters how that came together. I find it an interesting piece, and I find it more interesting than the one that I saw of yours before, Paul, was the cars, and that to me, this is a more successful image than the cars, because I'm not looking for the things that are out of whack. I just see the whole thing is kind of out of whack, and that makes it
Right.
interesting to my eye, and I keep looking for new things and looking into the dark holes and all.
No, thank you. Those are good comments, all of you. Thank you very much.
I think what really helps make it work so well is the shape of the bird. I'm going to call it a bird, because to me it looks like an owl. It doesn't look like an eagle. But I know the prompt was eagle, but it really, to me, looks like an owl with a little longer beak. But anyway, that beak happens to land right in the same place as the column in the building, the center column, if you want to call it that. So they match up, and then the shadows are on each side of it. It just, to me, that's what really makes it work. If that whole bird image was shifted over like 30% to the right or the left, it would really hurt the result, I think.
Yeah, and it was, you're exactly right. I lined those up on purpose. It was that shape in the building that reminded me of the beak of a bird.
Yeah.
But if you notice, interestingly, with the Firefly image, you go back to Anderson 3. Look at the dark spaces underneath the mouth. The Firefly picked up on that dark spaces in the building and repeated them here. So stuff like that, I think, just find is fascinating how it's working, and that, I think, helped the image when I merged them on top of each other.
Yeah. You know, I think it's an incredible. I mean, just like anybody, who is open enough to the idea of letting a machine create an image. I love the idea that, I mean, this to me, this idea of what you've done, one of your photographs put together with something, whether it's a texture or an image or whatever, created by AI, and then ran through your process to end up with this. I would think in your head it opens up a world that is just like gigantic now, right? It goes beyond the images that you may already have a collection of, to now be able to think about, building new images or creating new images through AI to see what it can do as you introduce them into your own photographs and then throw them into this mosaic program. It's just
Yeah, it's a whole new dimension. I just do think it has to be done very carefully, and it probably won't always work, but yeah, there's a whole new dimension here to work on. It's pretty exciting. Well, it's pretty fun to see.
It shouldn't always work. otherwise, what's the point, right? Yeah, hey, it always works. It's not.
Exactly.
It's no big deal.
Exactly.
It would be like rock and roll then. I play these 3 chords and I always got a hit. So what's the?
That's right.
I think that's great, Paul. This is really interesting. I look forward to seeing more. I will say, for whatever reason, I think this idea of the edge-to-edge mosaic without it floating in, the backgrounds that you have done before, really works. I really like this a lot. Not that I didn't like the other ones, but I think and maybe it's just because of the total abstract nature of this. And it kind of, like everybody was kind of saying, this feels like it might be a one frame out of a video, like you anticipate more movement. And I think by having that tight edge around it, that confinement creates maybe that little more tension in the image rather than having it floating into, an empty space of gray or blue or whatever around it. Something to think about, I guess.
Yep. I think it adds tension. Yeah. It contains it. Yeah. Yep.
Right. Well, so now you'll be my new story about the guy who actually got an AI image in one hit. That's
It was crazy. I came up and I went, oh, that's what I was looking for.
yeah. So, yeah. And anybody will tell you, don't get used to it.
Yeah, exactly.
as Greg will attest as we move on to his. Okay. So how do you want me to show you yours, Greg? This is kind of some.
I think, why don't you show those first two images, because those are the end results.
Okay, here.
Yeah.
So I think that might be. Is it that small? Yeah, it's only a 640.
Oh. Shoot.
I can still zoom in, but we'll lose a little bit of. That's not bad. Okay.
Yeah. It was pretty sharp. So this this one and the next one kind of they started as blends in Midjourney, working with. I did show the next one too, and then we can come back. So I did these. I saw somebody else did this prompt of glass spheres, and it took a whole bunch of prompts and testing to try to get these glass spheres. And you'll see the image in a minute, but I blended the glass spheres that I got with face and got these two completely different. I got a whole bunch of different iterations, but I really liked these two. You never know what you're going to get out of it, but they're nothing alike, and they integrated the spheres a lot differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I took into Photoshop, and I layered another one of the original bubble things. The bubbles that are up in the sky came out of something that was just layered over the sky in Photoshop, and then the eyes were done with the generative fill. Because the eyes were closed. And that took a few attempts, but I was pretty happy with the way these came out. It still feels like it needs a little more work to me. It doesn't look very realistic.
All right, so before we actually... Go ahead, Beverly.
Is she somebody you photographed, or you got her from AI? I'm brand new.
She's an AI. If you go to the next, go to the source image, one that shows. So on the left are the three source images. So the first two images are ones that were rendered in Midjourney. The girl was one I did a long time ago, and then the bubbles were the ones that I just rendered the background. And I got some really cool bubble pictures. And then the sunset photo was one I took out at Joshua Tree last week at sunrise. So that gave it the sky. It didn't really refer to the colors of that. You never know what it's going to
kind of did on the bottom one here. I mean, the warm tones.
Yeah, it did a little more of that sunrise color stuff.
Yeah, this glass bubble image here is incredible.
I really like that one. I had to do a few variations to get to something that really worked, but I was pretty happy with that one.
I think what's interesting when we did the panel discussion at OMA on the AI stuff, and I think, Greg, you were the one that kind of put together the phrase about AI or machine learning or machine generated stuff, is that there's the sense of that it's really just mimicking whatever it's been taught. But that thing has played on my mind so much about the idea that it's just mimicking. To me, it feels so much more creative than mimicking. And the question comes each time, do you really think that a machine can be creative? And I'm like, fucking look at that. I'm looking at these bubbles and I go, I don't, things keep happening inside these machine generated images that just like they blow my mind, that I go, I don't know that I've seen anybody do this sort of thing with a pen or a brush or anything else. I mean, yes, there's a lot of stuff out there, but some of the stuff that it's doing is just phenomenal. So
I think the disconnect. I think the disconnect is with this word creative. It's like it has so many different meanings to different people.
Right.
And from the context of what you're talking about, it's certainly creative. There's no doubt about it. But somebody else is going to go, oh no, creative means that it had to come from a human being.
Right. Right.
And the criteria they're using to judge this. It didn't come from a human being, but ultimately it was trained on human being work.
Yeah.
So,
and it's using references from like the girl is the reference for that was Mark Ryden,
right,
and there was no artistic reference or photographic style reference for the bubbles, so it's pulling from. I mean, it's probably rendered 1 million bubble images for various people, so it's had experience rendering that,
right,
and it knows Mark Ryden's style. Mark Ryden does a lot of these little girls with bunny rabbit and President Lincoln, so even if I didn't say bunny rabbit, it just throws a bunny rabbit in because it knows
his style,
Mark
right,
Ryden's style. The clothing is his. The clothing in the reference image, the one on the left, is not at all his style, but the final image with her holding the bunny is totally his style.
Mm-hmm.
And the other image down below is not at all.
Right.
And so it's really random as to what it's going to choose as.
So, I mean, let me clarify this also. So both of these images on the right were generated from blending the same 3 images?
Yeah.
And was there any prompt involved in the blend?
Yes, probably.
Okay.
There was actually probably not in the blend because I don't think you can put the prompt in the blend.
Right, until it's blended.
And then in variations after the blend.
Yeah.
You can.
How did that bunny turn into a cat?
Because he didn't have the same luck that Paul Anderson had. So I was wondering too, back on the other one, this one here where it says chocolate bunny maker, I go, I'm missing the chocolate and I'm missing the bunny. So
it's
Yeah.
more.
Well, I gotta see the chocolate.
Yeah, the chocolate's in the corner.
I guess.
Yeah.
The chocolate whole background floating there, but the color of it is not very chocolatey on what I'm seeing here. But yeah, I guess I saw it as a bunny. It's not quite a cat.
Right.
It's not quite a bunny.
Right.
it looks like a rat.
A rat.
No. Too sweet to be a rat.
It has a bunny nose.
I said a bat.
Oh, a
ears
bat.
really
Bat
remind me.
ears. Yeah.
And
And now these hands, did you have to do any work on those, Greg, or were they?
No, those were as they were, and they're a little funny.
Yeah, not bad though.
They're getting better.
And interesting too. I mean, I think several of the images that you've shown, even before tonight, is there's no intent to make them look like a photograph, right? They are sort of more painterly.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah, and this is the kind of art that I've been attracted
And
to.
I just
all
say
my
similar
life.
to the stuff that you've even created from scratch out of Photoshop.
Yeah. And so I'm not trying to make photographs. I do augment some photographs, but I'm always trying to make art. interesting images, and that usually means some style to it, and not trying to make it look like a real photograph.
So there's the.
But this looks like
That's the full size,
real.
yeah, detailed image. That's incredible.
And if you zoom in on these things, you see cities reflected in the little spheres, and
That's Indra's net, if you're familiar with that term.
It's what?
Indra's net.
And what does that refer to? Indra.
It's close. It's close. It's like every little blurb is a reflection of the entire universe.
Right, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's incredible.
So I really like the colors of that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this.
So is there a difference between glass bubbles and water bubbles?
Well, I think that if it's bubbles in water, you're going to have a different refraction. What it sees, I mean, I've seen people reference resin droplets or something like that, and with things that look similar to this. So it's going to, I don't know, it's going to do what it does.
Yeah, well, these are way better. These are beautiful.
Large body of work that it has to pull from.
And I think, again, I mean, I because what I'm doing is looking at using AI to help create photo composites like you're doing, but mine are meant to be more photographic. But this idea of looking, I mean, so I don't even, if I had this image now, it would conjure up all kinds of, like, where could I use this thing in something else? And this idea about sort of the machine informing your creativity, like it's this weird sort of cycle of like, oh, okay, and just as an example, I mean, I've done this before, but if I pull up Midjourney here, I know a lot of people that maybe are on the group tonight that are maybe familiar with using Photoshop to do those techniques directly on your photograph. But again, kind of like some of the stuff I'm doing or these things that Greg is doing is, generating these things inside of Midjourney. So you're working completely outside of Photoshop. And once this thing loads up, to be able to get into the program. And in some ways, I'm glad that this thing, it doesn't work entirely privately, because like you're saying, you see somebody else is doing something. So if I just go into Midjourney here, and Midjourney will have all these different rooms right here. So there's 20 of them. And so any one of these 20 rooms that I kind of click on, there are people working in there right now, and images are being generated. So if I pull all the way down to the bottom here and so this would be like, okay, so these are the freshest updates. They'll just keep popping up at the bottom here. The great thing is while you're in here, I mean, so I could put in a prompt down here at the bottom, and then it would put my image into the queue, and it would come up. But the cool thing about this is I can come through here and start looking at images, and then go, okay, this is pretty cool, and I can open it up even larger if I open it in a browser. So if I go, okay, these are kind of cool. Well, so how did this guy generate this thing? Let's see what happened. So if I come back in here, I can actually read their prompt here. Creative watch image time horology, whatever that is, vector line drawing, balanced mechanical, ultimate watch graphic image, watch enthusiast, watch lover. The -- AR is an aspect ratio of 2:3. These other parameters are so chaos creates how many, is the chaos the variations from one to the next?
Yeah.
And then the S is a style number, and so from 0 to 1,000, is it? I forget what all the numbers. Yeah. So you can there's all of these things are sort of extra parameters. You could probably generate it, something equally as interesting without even going into these, but there's a whole page where you can get in and start learning all of these sort of extra parameters that you can add to your prompting. But the important thing here is like, oh, okay, I like this idea that they just did. So and I'm totally free to do this thing. Is I can go ahead and I will copy his prompt, I'll come down here and I'll put in a forward slash. And so the way this works is oops, come on, it didn't do it. I always delete these things, otherwise they get way ahead of you. Oh, it is. I accidentally hit start. So anyhow, it's going to town. That was somebody else's. Okay, so let me do this again. Forward slash imagine, and then I'll put in the prompt. Okay, so I have the other prompt in here already. I could come in and I could change these sort of parameters at the end here. I can change the chaos number, the style number. I could also start adding to his or taking away from this also. So if I, like in this case, he created a vector line drawing. So if I take this out of it and instead I'll begin it over here, I'll say photo. Photorealistic, and then you could also add in, prompts that would tell it like what kind of lighting you want it to use, backlighting or cinematic is another one that a lot of people use.
Uplight.
Yeah. And you can create perspectives too by, bird's eye view, worm's eye view from the bottom. So anyhow, I can say, okay, so that's that. I'm gonna go ahead and just hit enter, and now more or less, again, this is where you start to learn that this concept of stealing doesn't exist in this world because you can borrow anything from anybody and generate something completely new. The thing that I did is that I did borrow his prompt, but I went in and changed it. And you can see these are already coming up looking more photorealistic than his line drawing and vector images that came up. Might not be equally as interesting, but it can be a beginning. And so you have to wait for it. We're only at 78% on the generation. And it's weird that these are on like studio backgrounds, so now it'll be at the bottom. So these are on like studio backgrounds, and then these have, I didn't even ask for any of this, right? And really interesting background here. But so I could go, oh, this one's cool. I like this one, has some more kind of interesting design to it. So grabbing this one, so 1, 2, 3, 4, so I can say upscale number 2, or make variations on number 2, and I have mine set up so that it asks me, do I want to again change the prompt from here before I proceed forward with it? So I could ask it to do something completely different. I'll just leave it as is. So it'll now generate 4 new images based on that number 2, and it'll be working on it down here at the bottom. Now what I normally do, so here's somebody else's already, and this is the cool thing too, is you can kind of, because it puts your name or whatever your call name is on Discord, you can come in and see if somebody else is using your prompts or borrowing your ideas. So here's mine working now. So that's his. So he's still working on a watch idea, right? So now I could look at his and go, oh, what did he change here to get where we are now, right? So he might have changed some numbers or also added in some other information. So anyhow, so here's my 4 variations. So these all stay on a black background. And they're all, again, similar, but every detail about it is slightly different. Even the blue bands have different designs on them. The center has the 2 clocks. The hands are all in different positions. The backgrounds are all different, but basically the same ornate kind of stuff. But that's the variations on it. So once I'm happy with it, I could say, then let's go ahead and generate an upscaled version of it, and it would upscale it to make it a full-size image, and then I could save that and use it for whatever I want to use it for. But the other process of working in here too is you can set up your own sort of private room here, and you can work on images here where you're not, these are all my things that I was working on, and they're all saved there. You can go back to any one of these and I can ask it to upscale or change and keep working. So this allows you to work in your own space and you're not sort of bouncing in and out of everybody else's images. It's really hard to find your stuff in one of those other rooms, but it's a great place to go in and learn, some of the vocabulary, I think. So yeah, if you haven't played with Midjourney, go ahead, Greg.
It's hard to find my own stuff in my own room.
Right. So anyhow, if yeah,
Larry?
go ahead.
I think Midjourney stole Paul's eagle owl for the watch face.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I noticed that too.
Oh.
I thought that as well.
Let's see. Someone's back up here.
Yeah. It looked like an owl's face.
There are certain things that it does not does it it tends to render something else. Whenever I write snail, it renders a mushroom.
Weird. Yeah. As if there wouldn't be enough references to snails out there that I'm sure it was trained on snail.
When I do snail in combination with certain things, it always renders mushrooms, and sometimes if I just say snail, it'll render a snail.
Huh.
Well, then
Maybe-
enter mushroom.
Then enter mushroom, yeah. Then you'll get a mushroom for sure. Anyhow, so if you're dealing with, and there's a bunch of other, there's some free programs out there, and if you're subscribed to Photoshop, you already have access then to Firefly, and so you can go into Firefly and generate from scratch. There are also, again, I don't think it works near as well, but there are ways in Photoshop where you can generate basically from Firefly. So I have, let me think if I have one in here. I thought I created, and again, it might be, that's a YouTube thumbnail. But so I thought I had a 10. Oh, here we are. So 1024 by 1024 is just the square. So I can start with just an empty pixel-based area, select the whole thing, and then go to generative fill and start typing in prompts here. And so let me see if it saved my other one. Control V. There it is. So here's the watch one. It's not going to, none of these are going to help the Firefly or Photoshop. It doesn't use any of those parameters. So if I use the same prompts there and hit generate, it will now going to create, in this case, it creates 3 images, which is always interesting too, to see how well any of the 3 sort of compare to each other. So here's the Photoshop version of, if you compare that to what happened in Midjourney, yikes. These are, I mean, again, it's kind of sticking to the vector-based idea too, and I could generate again. I could go in and change the prompts here also, but just to know that you can in Photoshop generate onto a blank canvas, and the other thing that's interesting still beyond that is if I where am I here? Where's my here we are. If I go into Firefly, don't forget Cyber Monday is over with. So if I go into, let's see, where's my Firefly from here? So if I go into Firefly, and this I don't really quite understand, and maybe somebody knows or has done it before, but so if I go into this text-to-image generator inside Firefly, and here's where I will add in my prompt, and I will use the same prompt here, and I'll do the same, get rid of these, because again, these won't matter here, and I'll just say generate. Now, the interesting thing I think that Firefly does do that's kind of cool is that it will generate the 4 images here, and by default, it defaults to the square image. Well, that's really good. So not even very colorful, right? But all their parameters are kind of over here, a lot easier to understand. So I can start with by going, okay, so let's go ahead and make this portrait 3 to 4, similar to the other one. Make it more photo-based, style strength. I can come down here to these techniques. I don't know if it'll actually add in. So now that I've asked it to do photo style, I could add in a bokeh and we'll say digital art and color and tone. I can select vibrant colors. That might be more like the other one. Lighting, let's pick, what did I say? We'll go with golden hour. And then composition, we're going to say shot from above. Let's see, where's, there we go, since we're already kind of that way. All right, and so all of those now have been added down here where the prompts are. So now I'll just hit generate, and it will generate 4 new images, hopefully more interesting than the first 4. And I probably should have, again, to end the confusion, I probably should have removed the vector line drawing here. But so there's that. So I could, let's do that. If I eliminated that, go back and generate again, and hopefully it becomes more photographic.
So this is Adobe, is that
Yes,
correct?
yeah, Adobe Firefly. There we go. So that's way more photographic. Still not as interesting as the Midjourney ones, but more realistic in a way.
Yeah.
Not bad. So anyhow, that's available
Is
to you. I mean, if you're subscribed to Photoshop, you have access to Firefly. But the interesting thing, and this is what I started to say, what I don't really quite understand is this is way more sophisticated looking than this. And so let me try this again. If I remove the vector. The only thing is I've added those extra parameters in there, so I could copy those and put them here too, but I won't remember them. So I'll just say regenerate again and see if it becomes more. Oh, and I didn't add in photo reality or whatever. But let's see if it becomes more photographic.
What is this program
So
you're
this
using
is This is in Photoshop. This is generative fill, but using it I just started not with one of my photographs, just an empty pixel file. So if you go up under File and New, you can create an empty file, and then you just have to select the whole thing and then tell generative fill to fill it, and then add in that prompt before you fill it.
Larry, I think Paul said that he entered the prompt in the, or was it Greg? No, it was Paul. In the style of, and then he entered the building. You can enter an image and say in this style.
So speak to that, Paul.
Yes, that's what I did. Yes, that's exactly what happened.
So when you said, so you entered in the style of, but then you entered in a link to the image. Is that right?
Or the image itself. Do you have I don't remember exactly. If you go back to the Firefly page that you had up, I think it's towards the bottom.
Yeah, I didn't know you could do that.
Thanks for asking that question. I was going to ask the same one.
Somewhere. Where was it?
Oh, here's upload your image.
There you go. Yeah.
So match,
Oh,
there it
that's
is.
right.
Match the style, from your own reference image. That's interesting. Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know.
And this is again for me goes back to this idea about like in this case, I can and also inside Midjourney I can enter in images, my own images and blend those my own personal images together, and this for me goes back to the same thing about camera clubs and competitions and all that. When we start asking the question about like, well, okay, they're not your pixels, you can't use them. I go, no, wait a minute, they are. I used two of my images, I put them into a digital program, and it blended them together. Again, how is it does create something completely different in terms of blending the images together to get an end result different than the way we would ever do it inside Photoshop. But the idea is, if I started with my own photograph, they are my pixels, I've generated a new image from those, how is that not my photograph anymore? Which to me only goes back to creating rules that then only proceed to the following questions. What about? So what about this? What about that? What if I do this? What if I do that? Right? That's why this thing becomes so much bigger and more complicated than a simple you can do this or you can't do that, because it automatically opens up a can of worms to what about if I started with my own two images first and put those into Midjourney and blended those together. Is that not my image? Well, I think most people wouldn't, most camera club presidents wouldn't know if they're not familiar with the process. And that becomes sort of the other thing too, is generating rules about things that not everybody knows about. And that was why I think recently somebody had asked me there on the Fallbrook Camera Club, and they said it was Heidi. She was asked to be on. They called it the AI task force to make it even more, militant. You're on the AI task force. So they're trying to figure out, rules for the club based on this. And so she contacted me and she goes, if I have any questions or, would you consult with me on this thing? Because this thing is like bigger than I know. And I go, absolutely. But I don't know, I don't know what help I can be, because a lot of the leaders inside of Fallbrook are very traditional photographers. And what's that group they belong to?
PSA.
Yeah, PSA group. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's they're very traditional kind of, photographers that are, they're probably gonna be happier with a new category. But anyhow, I'm not even sure that we finished up on Greg's. this is Larry's ADD. Oh, here's the.
They should just let ChatGPT decide if it's legal or not.
Yeah, this is like letting the Bible testify of itself. Yeah. So what was this image used for, Greg? These bubbles?
I didn't use this one in the other images. This was just another one of the really cool bubble pictures that I got out of
so
Midjourney.
this is an AI generated bubble image then. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just used Firefly to create some other ones. They weren't as nice, but I haven't used Firefly before.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I always, people had asked me what made me decide on using Midjourney, and I said, well, even before I had signed up for it, I was reading around on the internet about it and about all these other programs. And anybody who's doing a review ultimately ends up referencing Midjourney. Well, it's not as good as Midjourney, but I would say for a free program, it's pretty good. And so, it's like everybody wants to compare it to the Midjourney thing. It'd be like saying, okay, I use this other editing software program. Not as good as Photoshop, but I can pretty much get everything done that I need to get done, right? So that would make you go, well, why don't I just go to Photoshop? So that was how I ended up with Midjourney. Yeah, Kaz.
I found it really odd that I've had some friends that brag that they don't use Photoshop. They use some inferior program, and I should get extra credit because I used an inferior program.
Right. Yeah.
It's no, your image sucks.
Well, that's why in the conversation I had this morning with this person, we were talking about how when we went from analog to digital, at the fair, there was this big argument from the people who were still doing darkroom going, well, it's not fair because look what they can do in Photoshop. I can't do that in Photoshop. And I go, but it's a level playing field. This technology is available to everybody. You've chosen not to be a part of it. And yet then you want to hold everybody else back to your level, that's the way everything should be. And I go, that's kind of where we are again now. It's just like, well, it's not fair. This isn't photography. It's like, but it's the same technology that's available to everybody. You get to decide whether you want to use it or not. But that's my prejudiced point of view. And I'm going to stick with it for now. All right.
Greg, these bubble images are just gorgeous.
Yeah, this one is incredible.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
have another one that's in this
Yeah,
kind
that would really keep fun.
Yeah, you would win first place with this one.
Oh no AI, no AI.
photographic. That's just
There you go.
I'm not going to. Yeah, that's a great question. They are now my pixels. It came out of my camera.
Oh.
That's
The photograph. I've got the film. I have the film.
This is on 35 millimeter. I'll show it to you. Funny.
It's not even digital.
Right.
we can get it on film.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, okay. So that's I already shared this image. I couldn't remember if I did. Then I went back and looked at my thing, and I think I did share it last month. Did I? Did everybody see this image, or not?
I didn't see it. Well, no less.
Well, I'll tell the story anyhow. Okay, so this is part of an ongoing series of images that are from the series is called "Wish I Knew," which with the subtitle is "The Agnostic's Prayer." the agnostic's prayer is "Wish I knew," and so anyhow, it's a little tongue in cheek, but was weird again. This is interesting to me. So talking about again, I a lot of times called these things that people go, "Oh, I would never do a sky replacement." I go, "That's okay." But that doesn't give you the right to deny me to do a sky replacement. And these self-imposed limitations, right? Because they're not any limitation is not real. You've just created a self-imposed limitation, and that's fine if that's the parameter you want to create for yourself. So when I had started this process of doing these collaboration, composite images with Midjourney, I didn't realize, but in my head I had kind of created a self-imposed limitation, and that was that I didn't have a certain number in my head, but the idea was that I would use parts of Midjourney AI images with my own personal photographs. And I got started on this image because I had the idea what I wanted to do. So this is like this crossroads at the crossroad. I haven't even titled it yet, but the idea is standing at a crossroad, and let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe about 6 different images here. And as I started building the image, I kept trying to think about, I haven't introduced my photograph yet. And so by the time I got done, the image was done and I didn't need any of my own photographs. And so I kept trying to convince myself I got to find something of my own to put in here. And then I thought, no, I really don't. It doesn't have to have. So again, it's like that self-imposed limitation. I go, it works fine. The only interesting thing about this was in the process, I had this idea about this sort of crossroads sign in the old post, and I thought, well, I'm gonna have to go out and photograph this thing somewhere, find a post sign or whatever, and then incorporate it. And at about the same time, I use a lot of stock photo stuff for workshops and stuff, so that everybody who's taking the workshop is working on the same image. So I'll go through stock photo and find a landscape image that fits to a particular lesson that we're going to do in Photoshop in a workshop. And so I have a few different online subscriptions to stock photo places. And I got a notice from one of them just about the time I was working on this image saying that they were going out of business. And if you have credits sitting there, because you would, for $20, you would get 30 credits or whatever. So you have 30 credits to spend, and an image might be 5 or 6 or 8 credits, depending on what size the file is you're going to download. So anyhow, it says we're closing our doors by the end of November. And so whatever credits you haven't spent will just, go in our pocket, more or less. Is the way it worked out. You're not getting your money back. And so anyhow, I thought when I was working on the image, I go, well, I need to go out and find the sign to photograph. But I thought, well, wait a minute. I got some credits over at the stock photo place that are going to die. So I went through stock photo. I found the sign top part as one stock photo, and then the post as another stock photo, and then I weathered the sign using an overlay that I had from somebody else. Anyhow, so that was going to be my part of the photograph, but I didn't end up needing to do it anyhow. I used the stock photo credits to get the sign put in here. So that's the story behind how the image was built. Anyhow.
So
if you have him turning around with his finger coming towards you, like move into the future with me.
Well, somebody had asked me in all the images, basically it's the backside of the robed character, and it is meant to be anonymous. It's kind of the one part of it, and the other idea. Actually, and I will say, this to me is an interesting thing. When we think about how AI images are created and how they were trained on everybody else's images, and if we all want to be honest, we've all been trained on somebody else's images. We all learned by gathering information from other artists and photographers for many years, and this character came to me, or the idea came. I'd been generating a bunch of these robed figures inside Midjourney to use for compositing, and Robert Park Harrison has that series called The Architect's Brother. If you haven't ever seen the series or not familiar with his work, look it up. He's actually it's a self-portrait. He is in each one of his images, and he went to some used clothing store and bought this old suit, and his character wears this suit in every image, basically a simple black suit and a white shirt. And his wife worked with him in creating these photo composites that they do, and it's sort of a post-apocalyptic world view, and this guy is sort of like trying to put the world back together again, and he creates these photo composites, and he does it. He does it the extremely hard way, an old process where you're using paper negatives, which means the negatives are printed onto photo paper, and they're the size of whatever the final print is, because they're then contact printed by using multiple paper negatives and registration to each other. It's a whole process, a lot different than what Jerry Ullsman did, and equally as difficult, but we certainly have it made using Photoshop, but that's the way he did his. But his idea on this character was the sort of like, the everyday man was what this character was supposed to be. It wasn't supposed to be him, it was not supposed to be anybody in particular, but he just said it started out with the idea he was the model that was available every day that he wanted to do a photograph. So he and his wife decided he would be the one in the photograph. Well, at one point, the suit got so dirty, they went and they laundered it, and now it's too small for him. So now all the jacket sleeves come up a little bit higher on him. The pants are shorter now, which made the whole costume even more interesting. You can kind of see it in the photographs. But this idea of having this common character or everyday man in the image, I borrowed from his idea. I like that idea that there's a common thread that runs through the images, and even though mine's not always wearing the same robed attire, but they always are robed, hooded, and then that symbol on the back of the robe, I've added that to each one of the photographs, which was an AI prompt that I asked it to create a symbol that meant hope. And so it came up with this symbol, and I use it on all the images now. So that's the idea behind it.
Larry,
Yeah.
what kind of prompt did you use for your middle ground figures? It's just beautiful how they merge into the mist. Is that kind of what you...
So AI generated back, I think, I can't remember I'd have to look at my image, but the prompt was something about wandering souls or something like that, and this is actually I generated several images using the prompt, and this is actually two of them put together. None of them had this many figures in it, and so I ended up putting a few of them together to get as many figures as I have in the end result here.
Yeah, really evokes the mysterious unknown.
Right, that's kind of the whole series. That's the agnostic. Yeah, Cass.
I wanted to recommend something possibly in the title. Of course, I know that your focus is on the agnostic, but this thing here really doesn't have an agnostic look to it. It looks very spiritual. And
by the way, though, agnostics can be very spiritual. I just want to throw that out.
All right. So there is a character in Voodoo. His name is Papa Legba.
I saw you wrote that in the comment there. Papa Legba.
Yeah, Papa Legba is a guardian, a voodoo guardian at the crossroads.
I'll have to look into the story.
It's been dead in the title. Yeah.
See, I thought you were going to have me add more smoke.
More smoke.
More cowbell.
More cowbell.
More cowbell.
Funny. All right. I always ask, but I don't think I have. Did anybody send in anything that we haven't looked at? I mean, mostly I got stuff from Paul Anderson and from Greg Klemp, and that was kind of it. So let me get back to my closing graphic here. So
That was very interesting.
Yeah, so thanks everybody for jumping in tonight and discussing all things AI or not. So, um, again, like I said, we're still kind of, I think, feeling out what we want the group to be. I'm totally open to suggestions. So at any time in a meeting, if somebody wants to do a hey, what about, then that's good for me. If you want to send me an email, that's even better. Like, hey, why could we do this or do this? Or suggesting topics are great. Like I said, again, we've got a few people in the room that have been using these programs and would have some insight that many of us wouldn't have on our own, which is, I think, the intent of always doing these sort of things. And like my thing that I've always my little closing thought. And actually, I think I made a slide about this. So this was from my other DPX group, was about stay creative, be inspired, and be an inspiration to others. To me, that's what this is really all about: is being able to inspire each other to do some real creative work and have a place to show it and share it and let Kaz tell you that you need some more smoke and and improve your images. That's more, or as Don Fike said, more cowbell. All right, so there's a reference for you. See if you can figure that one out. All right, thanks everybody.
Well, thanks, Larry. This was a great forum.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you all for being
very
here.
nice.
All right.
One of the things I like about this is it's as far as gender, it's almost 50-50, which I know the guys are yakking more than the ladies.
Well,
I like the fact.
which I also
Trying to get a word in.
Which I also want to point out, though, Monday morning is all women, so you guys have a lot of catching up to do. I go, my standard joke is that when finally a guy shows up, I go, thank you, you've just doubled the testosterone in the room. So yeah,
Come on over, guy.
I haven't heard you complain,
I'm not
Larry.
complaining. It's a great morning. So thank you everybody who shows up, male or female. Thank you everybody for showing up.
I'm still working on my 30 purple birds. I'll try to have them next
All
week.
right, excellent. All right, good night.
Thank you.
Thanks for
All right,
Larry.
Thanks, man.
Bye.
bye. All right, everybody, thanks for coming to DPX-AI tonight. And until we see each other next month, stay creative, be inspired, and be an inspiration to others.